Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're joined today by Artisan, and representing Artisan is Dave Baxter. I'm Evan Gilman from Royal Coffee. I'm the creative director, and I'm a sort of roasting gadfly, as it were, too. So I'm really happy to have Dave here to speak a little bit about especially the new release of Artisan, which is very, very interesting. There's a lot of new functionality and a lot of new things going on there. I won't get too far into it because that's Dave's territory, and he has a lot to share. So without further ado, I'll let Dave give his own introduction and take it away, Dave.
Okay, well, thank you, Evan, and thank you everyone who's joining. I appreciate your time today, and I think we're going to have some fun and go through some things in Artisan, both old and new. But if you have the reaction today of saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't know I could do that, and I can use that," then I will have succeeded in what I'm trying to accomplish. So we'll talk about some of the new features and some features that have been there for a while, and I think we'll have fun.
Yeah, and if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put those in the Q&A section. We're going to get to your questions after the webinar is finished. I'm sure that along the course of this webinar, Dave is going to answer quite a few of the questions that might come to mind. So just go ahead and toss them in the Q&A, and we will get to your question later on in the webinar.
Yeah, great. I'm going to move fairly quickly today, and since this is being recorded and will be available on the website, you'll be able to watch it back. And if I went too fast on something, you'll be able to see it again. So I apologize if I'm going real quickly, but there's a lot to talk about, and I'd like to cover as much material as we can.
All right, I'm going to mute myself now, and I'm going to let you take it away, Dave.
Okay, let me get my screen share going here. Oh, where is it? Okay, I think we should have it. Is that up? Excellent. Okay. So as a little bit of introduction, I'll just tell you, I've been roasting for over 15 years now, and I got involved. Well, I started using Artisan about 7 or 8 years ago, and saw a number of things that I wanted to do to extend Artisan, to enhance it, and so on. And I started making some contributions early on. And so over the past 7 years or so, I've been a part of the Artisan team and making contributions to the code and things like this webinar and so forth. My background, I'm an engineer. I've been in high tech all of my life and in Silicon Valley. So coming at roasting from an analytic that I've always done it, but roasting and Artisan as well are great because you can apply science, but roasting coffee is more than just science. There is an art to it, absolutely. And there can be innovation and lots of exploration. And so roasting coffee and working on Artisan, they go hand in hand in that regard. The Artisan team, I'll talk a bit about Artisan, but I want to recognize Marco Luther, who has since the beginning of Artisan been the guiding light and driving force behind it. As I say, I joined about 7 years ago, and then Michael Herbert joined us after I did, but he had taken the initiative to write a quick start guide for Artisan, which really helped out from the documentation side. And he's also helped a lot of users on public forums. And so we're a small but pretty powerful team. Artisan is open source. It's free to use. It's used by a wide range of roasters, from large production shops to small home roasters. It's 15 years old, so it's quite stable and mature and full of innovative features. At Artisan, we pride ourselves on listening to users for their input on features and how things operate. And we also support them in public, and by that I mean in public forums and so forth. And that's for the benefit of all of the Artisan users. We don't have hidden, private, or moderated forums for support. So I think it's a model that works very well. With Artisan, your data is private. Your data is your own. Your roast profiles will remain on your computer. They're not loaded into the cloud unless you decide you want to do that. Artisan is very focused on, you own your own data and it's yours. And we also don't force you into updates as some other products do. We encourage our users to use the most recent release, but you're never forced to have to update. Artisan is available in well over 20 languages. It's supported on multiple platforms with this new release, version 2.60, which was just released last night. We also have legacy builds now to support older Windows and Mac OS environments, and also an earlier Raspberry Pi environment. It's community supported, and I want to just give a shout out to the many Artisan users who support each other on like the discussions page at the Artisan GitHub and in other forums. And we really appreciate your support. And we also have folks that have done translations for us as well. And we really appreciate the community support that Artisan gets. Artisan.plus is an inventory management system for Artisan that was introduced a couple of years ago. It's subscription-based, but one of the great features is the direct import of green bean data from supplier partner sites. And Royal Coffee provides direct links on their crown jewel pages so that you can import data directly on their green bean offerings into your Plus account. Our partners offer discounts, and they have some other offers that can help to offset the subscription costs. And Royal Coffee is offering free access, excuse me, free access to Plus users to their on-demand training courses. And I think that's a fabulous benefit because those courses are excellent. And they can add up in their costs if you were to watch each individually and pay for them as you go. And we really appreciate Royal Coffee offering that to our users. The pricing is simple. There's no additional cost for multiple users, multiple storage locations, or multiple machines. There's a free trial for 3 months, although you don't get the partner coupons with the free trial. But when you sign up, if you do, and for home users, it's 49 euros a year for roasting up to 500 kilograms managing that in the Plus service. And for home roasters, 500 kilograms, quite a bit. That's 3 pounds a day. So I don't think, even as a home roaster myself, that I add up to that much. And professionals, 499 euros a year, and it's unlimited. This is a browser page that I've opened here, looking at Crown Jewel on the Royal website, and you can see that they've added a new link, and this is what it looks like. Add to your Artisan Plus account. So let me show you what happens when I click on that icon. Whoop, come on. There we go. It opens a new browser tab and asks if I want to import the following beans into my Plus account. And you'll notice that here, all of the bean data that is on Royal's Crown Jewel page has been brought directly into my Plus account, and I can just make one click to import all of this, which I will do, and then flip over to my stores account. In my case, I have 2 places that I keep beans. I have a storage room, and I've also got my roasting room. And you can see that this Crown Jewel, the Peru Organic, was imported, and it's available in my storage room. Plus is full of great little graphical reports that you can see all kinds of data about your bean inventory. And my favorite with the Crown Jewels are these 2, which show moisture and the water activity of the beans that I have in my bean inventory.
And something that you and I talked about before, Dave, was looking at those stats. We can kind of decide which coffees we might want to roast first or which coffees we might want to push to the front of production. Since we know things about like water activity is pretty high, you might want to get that coffee out a little bit quicker. So
yes. And it might also inform you on what kind of a profile you want to use, how much heat to apply early on in the roast and so forth. So very useful,
Right.
very useful. So we're very proud and appreciative of the support from Royal Coffee, and hope that you'll find reason to use Plus and Royal and direct import of your bean data. Question I'm asked a lot is, how can I help Artisan? The best way to support ongoing development, because Artisan is free to use, but it's not free to develop. So the best way to support the ongoing development of Artisan is to become a Plus subscriber. And you'll support that ongoing development. You can also join the Artisan team, whether you're a programmer or you'd like to write some documentation or want to do some design work. Translations are always helpful, and supporting other users. And again, a thank you to the Artisan community that is already doing these things. Another way to support Artisan is just make a financial contribution. Happy to have that as well. So I think we're ready to get started with the material here. Today's agenda, I'm going to cover a number of aspects of Artisan. There's so much to talk about with Artisan that we just can't get through all of the great features that exist there. But we'll cover these topics. And I want to start with a word about smoothing, because I get asked this all the time. Artisan offers different smoothing options, and I get asked, what should I set for my smoothing? And we could do an entire webinar on this subject, and maybe we should.
Definitely possible if
Yeah.
we find the interest. Absolutely.
Yeah, but the quick answer is use the minimum amount of smoothing that can still show useful information. A lot of people over smooth their curves, and so they look pretty because they're nice and smooth, but a lot of useful information gets hidden when you do that. You want to have a little bit of noise in your ROR curves, but not so much that it obscures the real information about what's happening in your ROR. And just so you don't have to ask me later, the curves in this presentation, they were taken from my roaster. The smoothing that I use is shown here. It's really quite little. I have smoothing turned off. Smooth spikes is on, but a short delta span, and the sampling that I use is 1 second. Now, that's not to say these are the right settings for you and your roaster, but the curves you'll see today used these. So I want to begin by talking about the mouse cursor. There are some capabilities here that have been in Artisan for some time, and some that are new in the new release. But there's a lot of information that you can extract from your curves just from the mouse cursor itself. Before we get started, just a comment. My graphs here today are in Fahrenheit. Artisan works both in Fahrenheit and in Celsius. You can move back and forth very easily between the two units. But today I'll be working in Fahrenheit temperatures here. So the mouse XY cursor is probably familiar. If you've used Artisan, you've seen this little display at the top of the screen. It shows the time and temperature. And here we're showing the temperature on the temperature axis on the left-hand side of the page or of the graph. And when you move the mouse cursor to any point on the screen or on a curve, what's displayed in that display is the time and temperature at that point at the tip of the mouse. But you may not know that Artisan can switch into setting the mouse to work on the delta axis, or what a lot of people might call the ROR axis. And that axis is on the right-hand side of the screen. And if we toggle the mode by touching the D key, we'll switch over to showing the degrees per minute wherever that mouse cursor is pointing. So now it's showing me the time and the degrees per minute at the tip of the mouse cursor. Okay. A new capability in Artisan now is what we call clamp mode. And the Z key will toggle this cursor into that clamp, into the clamp mode. Currently it's off. And each time I hit the Z key, it will cycle to the next mode. So we'll start with BT. And what is the clamp mode? Well, first let me get the cursor display back onto the temperature scale by using the D key. And now I'll click the Z key and we're clamped to the bean temperature curve. What this means is wherever the mouse is, it's going to display the time at that where the mouse tip is, but the temperature is taken from the BT curve at that time. So I might look at my damper change and want to know what the BT temperature was at that point in time, or anywhere else. If I hit the Z key again, I'll flip over to now being in looking at the environment temperature curve at the time where the mouse cursor is. Z key again, and we're looking at the background bean temp, and Z key again, and I'm looking at the background environment temp. So when I'm in a clamped mode, wherever I move the mouse cursor, the display will be showing the curve temperature at that time.
This is super useful for me as I go through and try to notate all the different changes I've made during a roast when I'm writing like writing something about a roast that I've done, or if you want to describe to maybe like a coworker or something like that, this is going to be super useful.
Yes, yes, and we can also clamp. What I had just done here is click the D key while I'm clamped to the bean temperature. And now you see the display has changed to degrees per minute. So now that mouse cursor is clamped to the ROR curve for bean temperature. And cycling with the Z key more, we can look at the ET ROR, and we can also look at the ROR curves in the background as well. So the combination of the D key and the Z key is pretty powerful. Now there's another new key in the most recent release, and this can turn on what we call LCD cursor mode. And this one I think is the one that is going to be the most popular, Evan, and for other users. So let me go ahead and turn that on. I'll click the U key, and you notice that the LCDs now on the right-hand side of the graph are showing those curve temperatures wherever I have the mouse pointed. So it's sort of like the clamp mode, but for all of those curves at once, and including curves that are not necessarily temperature curves, like my fan pressure curve. If I hit the U key a second time, it now is displaying the background curves in those LCDs. So I can look at my current profile, or I can look at my background just as easily with using the U key. And I would also want to point out to you that while those LCD cursors are on, this display is also doing exactly what it was set for. So in this case, it's clamped to the background. I'm sorry, not the background, but the profiles bean temperature in the degrees per minute mode. The next capability with the mouse cursor that I want to talk about has been an Artisan for some time, but probably a little used because you may not be aware of it. And that is a feature called crosshairs. And they can be toggled on by hitting the T key. And on Windows, it works most reliably using Control-Shift-T. And that's because Windows sometimes misinterprets that T key as wanting to get into the Tools menu. So on Windows use Control-Shift-T, and on other platforms, just the T key. But when we toggle that, I'm going to get back into our mouse cursor mode. And we'll come around with with the Z key, and then I will turn on, get all of our things into the mode that I wanted it to be in. But now I'll hit Control-Shift-T, and that turns on these crosshairs. And the crosshairs are great because now you can line things up. You can see what was happening at a particular point in time. Like if I line up to this damper position, I can point to the bean temperature curve, or see all of the temperatures at that point in time. So it's very, very useful
And this is what I used to use, but now that I know about this new functionality, it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, and they all tie together. Um, so the final mouse capability that I want to demonstrate is click and drag of the crosshairs in order to make a measurement on the graph. And this is great when you want to just extract delta temperature or delta time information right from the graph. So I'll take a look here maybe at this gas change. Where was the bean temperature at that time? So I'll click down and then I hold the mouse key down. You see it's made a mark there where I started this measurement, and I'll come over to the damper change on the BT curve, and I got to get that lined up. There we go. And now you can see in the upper left-hand part of the screen, it's showing me the delta time between those 2 points, almost 3.5 minutes. It shows that the delta temperature, and the ROR is the ROR calculated between those 2 points. So these are a lot of capabilities of, where you can extract information using your mouse cursor directly from your graphs. There we go. So just to prevent any confusion here, the D key and the Z key, which are the cursor mode and the clamp mode, those are available when you're roasting. So you can clamp your mouse cursor to one of the curves as I showed while you're roasting. The U key is not available because obviously the LCDs are showing the temperatures of the roast, and the toggle crosshairs is not available during during a roast either. But the other two work really, really nicely when you're roasting. It's a great addition to be able to tie to those curves. So let me move on to showing and hiding curves. There's a couple of different ways to show and hide curves, whether you're roasting or looking at a profile after your roast. The first way that I'll show you here is by clicking on the LCDs themselves. And if I click on our environment temperature, that curve gets hidden. If I click on, you can bring them back just as easily by clicking on the LCDs. So it's very handy if your graph is cluttered and you want to hide some of the curves. Just do that by clicking on the LCDs. When we're stopped and we're viewing a profile as we are here, there's a legend. My legend is located in the upper left part of the curve here. And if you click on the labels in the legend, that will also hide those curves. This capability is not available when you're roasting because the legend is not shown at the time you're roasting. But when you're roasting, you can click on the LCDs to hide and show curves as the roast is progressing. Now, you might have noticed our ETROR curve has not been showing, and that's because I've had it turned off in my curves configuration page here. I can turn it on from here or off, but the rate of rise LCDs, I've got my delta ET checked already. So the LCD is showing, and that means I can click over here and just turn my ETROR curve on. So I can hide it or show it at any time that I want. Now, just a quick aside with ETROR. On my roaster and perhaps on yours, you can see it's taking quite a negative turn there right around the time of first crack. And some people like to use the ETROR curve as an indicator for when first crack is actually happening rather than just using the audible cracks themselves. But with the ETROR going negative like this, you can't see what's happening with the curve. So there's a couple of ways to deal with that. One, of course, would be to change the scale for ETROR here to go negative and show those negative excursions, but that will waste a lot of graph space and screen space. I don't really want to do that. But what I can do is I can offset this curve very, very simply. And we do that by going to the config menu and choosing curves and then setting a symbolic assignment here. X for our ETROR plus 10. 10 is a small number, but remember we're on the degrees per minute scale. So when I do that and click OK, Now my ETROR curve has shifted upward, and I can see what's happening with that curve. And in this case, I chose this one because it was kind of an interesting ETROR, what was happening at that time. But you can make that setting with the symbolic assignment and have that on during your roasting and have the curve shifted as well. And if the ETROR curve is in your way or any other curve, you don't want to see it during the entire roast, you can just click the LCDs to hide it and bring it back anytime that you want. Some additional control over your curves is with show full curves and the navigation toolbar. And let me introduce here a new profile. And in this one, you can see that I recorded my between batch protocol. Artisan allows you to easily record your between batch protocol and charge when the charge time comes, and record your profile as normal. And as a habit, I always record my between batch protocol because I want to compare one roast to another. And Artisan allows you to do that as well, and see how well under control is my between batch and how repeatable am I from batch to batch. Now, the background curve I chose for this part of the presentation wasn't chosen because I was trying to follow it, because clearly I didn't follow it very well if that was the purpose. I really chose it because of the contrast, so that you can see the difference between the curves and actually see the background curve. Had I followed it very well, you wouldn't even be able to see it. You might want to only see your profile curve, however, from the time of charge to the point of drop, and hide the data that's before charge and after drop. And you can do that with Artisan using this show full capability. So if I go into the curve setup and flip to the filters tab here and untick the show full, now I'm only seeing my profile curve from charge to drop. The same thing is possible to do with the background curve. Currently, show full is turned off. So if I tick it and turn it on, now you can see the between batch protocol for the background curve that was here. Now, if I want to focus in on just the roast profile part of this curve and not show the entire curve from the beginning through the between batch protocol and so forth, I can go into my axes setup and choose auto, and Artisan will set the time scale such that we're focused in now on the roast portion of the curve. We talk about the navigation toolbar. You've probably seen these icons, but I don't know how many people actually use the capability that's here. And I think it's quite useful. So let me walk you through that and get you familiar with what's here so that you can give it a try and see if it will work for you. The icons over here on the left are kind of like browser icons. Home will take you back to the display you started with. And then there's a back and a forward button so that if you make a change in the display, as you'll see here, you can move forward and backward through those stops where you stopped viewing it. The first button is a pan and zoom. And if I left click and hold and then just drag, I can drag in either direction, but now I can see my between batch protocol without changing my time axis in the time axis setup. It's a very quick way to just be able to move back and forth. If I turn on the ETROR curve, you can see this one was not offset. So I can just pan upwards and drag that ETROR curve up so I can see it. I can go back a step, as I mentioned, or go back home, which is back to where we started here. If I right click on the graph and then drag upward, I'm going to stretch my vertical axes. And if I drag downward, I'll compress them. And this curve, which has a little bit of a crash there, when you compress it, you can see the crash sort of looks like it goes away. So this is one way to hide your crashes, I guess. If I right click and then drag to the left, it compresses the time axis. Drag to the right and it'll stretch that time axis out. And oh, there goes that crash again. It's gone. Well, not really, but we'll go back home. And yes, you can see it's there. But this capability allows you to very quickly take a different view of your curve and then jump right back without having to set various numbers in your time axis scale or in any of the vertical axis scales. The next icon, the magnifying glass, this is zoomed to a rectangle, and you just click with your left mouse and drag to draw a rectangle, and Artisan will zoom in on that area. You can go back easily. Let me turn that off there. And then the final capability is the lines dialog. And here what I'm going to do is go to that ETROR curve again. I'll go over to the Delta ET tab and select it. And I want to make it a little less in my face in the graph. So I'm going to change it from dotted to, or two dotted, and then the width from 2 pixels to 1. Click apply and OK. And now we can still see all of the ETROR information, but it's not quite as bold and in my face. And not that I have anything against ETROR. Some people use it to guide their roasts at every step. But this just gives you a flavor for what you can do in managing how your curves actually look. Next, let's move on to roast phases setup. Because we're going to close with a simulated roast. I want to show you how the roast phase LCDs work. And the roast phases will set that up. So let me open my phases dialog. And you may be familiar with this dialog or perhaps not, but here for each of the 3 phases, drying, the Maillard, and the finishing phase, you can set a start and end temperature. For the drying phase, Artisan defaults to 300 degrees. You could set a lower starting point, but there's really not a need to. What most people focus in on is when dry ends, and that's defaults here to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Next is the Maillard phase. And Artisan will indicate with shaded areas on the graph where this is, and it runs from end of dry to first crack start. And so that's what this shaded bar is indicating. And then the finishing phase, or the development phase, starts at 390, the way this is set, and runs to 450 degrees. And you could set that maximum temperature to whatever you like. It's not used for phase setting at all. But these two numbers, the end of dry and the end of the Maillard phase, which is really first crack, they inform Artisan's auto dry and auto FCS features if you turn them on. Auto FCS can be a little bit confusing if you turn it on and you're roasting different beans all the time. If you're roasting the same bean roast after roast after roast, you may not want to be marking the start of first crack for each one of those if you're repeating your roast very closely. So you may want to turn on auto FCS here and just let Artisan mark it for you at the temperature that's indicated in the phase table here. If you're roasting, as I say, different beans all the time, you probably don't want to have this turned on, and you want to use the button that Artisan will present to you. Click on that button to mark your FCS when it occurs. Auto dry, I think there's some people who like to mark that at the true end of their dry phase or end of yellow. Some people will mark, and they'll mark that manually. Other people will set this here and just at 300 degrees mark that dry period, assuming that it's close enough. It's your choice if you want to have Artisan to mark it automatically or you want to mark it manually. But if you do turn these on to mark automatically, the temperatures that will be used are those that are in this table. I've added here a BT curve and a background BT curve to show a couple of the additional options here. The other curves from these profiles have been hidden using the LCDs. But auto adjusted, what does auto adjusted do? Well, what it does is it brings in the temperatures from the profile that I loaded, and it'll set those temperatures into the shaded areas that you see here. And With auto adjusted, as I say, the last profile that you load, it's going to load those temperatures in. So these temperatures may change from roast to roast depending upon the last profile that you loaded. If you're using background profiles and you want to pull your phase temperatures from the background, you can do that. Click from background and Artisan will pull the temperatures in from your background curve and load them in like this. You
I
can
can
have
see
both of
this
these
being,
options. Oh,
oh,
excuse me.
sorry. I can see this being super handy for people who want to automate their roast as well in some way. This is really
Absolutely.
super effective.
Absolutely. And if you load a background profile that you wish to follow, or you wish to automatically have it follow, as in a recipe that with automation that it can follow it, it can pull the temperatures directly from here. And depending upon how you've marked your auto capability, you can have Artisan mark that automatically. You don't have to do so manually.
It's great.
If both auto adjusted and from background are selected, it'll just use whatever was the last profile that you loaded, whether it was in the background or not. It will pull those, excuse me, it will pull those temperatures in. So let me go forward to push my temperatures, the ones that I use on my roaster in here, 300 degrees for the end of dry and 380 degrees for the end of the Maillard phase or my first crack start. And we'll use those in a moment in our simulated roast. But I want to talk about the phases LCD modes for a second, because this is what we're going to be looking at in the next section. And you have three choices for your LCDs modes: time, temp, and percentage. This is the way that I use them. I use the time mode during dry, during the drying phase, the temperature mode during the Maillard phase, and percentage is set for the finishing phase, but I always check the all mode. And we'll get into what does that do. But the all mode is pretty powerful for controlling the end part of your roast. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's move on to a simulated roast. Artisan has a built-in roast simulator. Again, this could be the topic of another webinar to go through how to use the simulator. I'm not going to get into all of its usage here, but you have to provide Artisan with a roast curve that you want to follow from the simulation, because we're not connected to a roaster. We have to get the temperatures from somewhere, and we'll get them in this case from this curve. So I will go and put Artisan now into the simulator mode. I held down the control key when I did that, so I put the simulator in a 4x mode, and what that does is it's going to run the simulator at 4x real time, and that means we can get through a 10-minute roast a lot faster than 10 minutes.
Very
So
effective.
I'll reset to clear my display, and let's just check a couple of things pre-flight here. Yes, we are in simulator mode. We know we're in simulator mode because the buttons are white rather than their normal color. I'm sampling at 1 second. The phases are set the way that I had set them previously. And now I want to choose a bean to roast, even though it's simulated, but I'm going to go to my roasting room storage from my Plus account, and I'm going to pick this crown jewel, the Worka Sicaro. So let's roast that. We could enter a weight, but I'll skip that for this demonstration.
And that
And
weight
let's
can also
turn.
be entered automatically with Akaya, but that's another topic.
Yes, Artisan has a capability where you can directly pull a weight measurement in from your Akaya scale right into Artisan. And yes, you can pick the weight from there. And when you're in simulation mode, you can enter any weight you want. It's not going to affect your inventory. I just chose to skip it in this case. But now that I've turned Artisan on, you'll notice at the left-hand side of the screen, I have a couple of sliders that I can use for entering my damper position and for controlling my gas. And I have buttons across the bottom that are my custom buttons that I use with my roaster. For this simulation, I'm not going to use any settings for the power damper. I want to focus in on the phases LCDs, but they're there so that you know. And on the right-hand side, the LCDs are showing a temperature. If this were a real roast and you were connected to your roaster, those temperatures would be changing, excuse me, as they would be live temperatures from the roaster. Here, it's just reading the very first temperature from that curve. So let's go ahead and start. And our roast has begun, and we're getting ready for charge to happen. I have auto charge turned on. So my roast is charged. I'm headed towards my turning point, and notice we're going quite quickly because we're running at 4x real time. The phases LCDs are up at the top part of the screen. Now that we've just passed the turning point, we're beginning to get some data there, and what's being shown is the time since turning point. And in the dry LCD, it's displaying the projection or the prediction for what time dry is going to happen. And I've just paused the simulator by clicking on the timer display. And this is a great feature because you can stop and you can make some adjustments to your settings if you want, or add a new button. There's all kinds of things you can do when you pause the simulator. For a future version of Artisan, we're looking at how do we actually stop when you're on a real roaster and freeze the roast right at that point. But that's a little harder to do, and I'm just kidding. I don't know any way to actually stop with a real roaster, but I wish we could. But here we're paused in the simulation, and if I bring my cursor over and hover it over one of the LCDs, you see that we're in the time mode, and it says that if we right click, we can cycle from time to percentage to temperature. Let me talk for just a moment about the display here. After turning point, you see there are a couple of chevrons, and what that's indicating is that we've passed the turning point. And what's displayed is since TP, and it's been 1 minute and 11 seconds. Those chevrons are ahead of the dry indicator. So this is telling us that we have not hit dry yet, and the 422 is the prediction of when dry is going to happen. And if we follow this projection curve right here, it meets the shaded area, which, remember, in our phases setup was the end of dry temperature. That's at 4 minutes and 22 seconds. So we know where we're at from those indicators. And if I right click on one of the LCDs, could be any of those, it will flip us over into the percentage mode. We don't have a dry percentage yet because we haven't gotten there, but we see still that dry is predicted to happen at 422. And let me flip to the next mode, which is temperature mode. And this is showing us that since the turning point, the temperature, the BT temperature in this case, has risen by 39 degrees. And now you'll notice a little bit different indicator over here. In front of dry, there's a down arrow. And when we're in the temperature mode in the LCDs, you'll see this for the next event. And the 207 it's a countdown, and it's saying we're 2 minutes and 7 seconds away from dry based on that projection. So if we take the 207 and then the 215, which is displayed over here in the timer, that's 422. That's what we had displayed before in the time prediction. So this will give you a countdown on your way to dry. And the time in between the two, this is based on the prediction, and it is telling us that the time from the turning point to dry should be 3 minutes and 18 seconds, the time from one event on to the next. So let's go ahead and flip back into our time mode and restart the simulation to run on here. And we're continuing to run. You can see that the time from the turning point continues to go up. Our dry prediction time is moving around a little bit as we have a shaky BTROR. Our BT is moving a bit. Now it's kind of settling down as we head on towards that dry point. And I'm going to mark that dry point manually right as we hit 300 degrees. And I can do that by pressing the space bar because my dry end button is marked in red. If I hit the space bar, it will press that button and move on to the next for me. And now we're past the dry point. And I'm going to pause the simulator one more time here so we can take a look at our LCDs. So I'll click on the timer and pause once more. And now you can see, let me come around and hover hover over one of the LCDs to show that we're in the temperature mode. And what we're showing is that the temperature has, bean temperature has risen 162.5 degrees since our turning point and 35.4 since dry. And because we're in temperature mode, you see the countdown for FCS. It says we're 1 minute and 47 seconds away. Excuse me, the AUC is area under the curve. It is a different indicator than phases. We'll cover that perhaps in another session, what that's actually telling us. If I right click on the LCD, it will take us into that time mode again. It should look familiar from what we saw before. It says that we're predicting to have FCS at 7 minutes and 57 seconds into the roast. And right click one more time, I'll get into the percent mode. It's interesting, but perhaps not useful at this time to look at percentages to know that dry at this point in time is over 78% and our ramp is under 22, but it's available to view whenever you right click on the LCDs. You can switch them around to look at these various things. So let's go back into temp mode and let's get roasting again here in simulation land. So we're moving forward, headed towards our first crack. And we're beginning to get close here. The countdown is saying we're 1 minute away and getting closer. I'm hearing some outliers. I don't know if you can hear them through the microphone here, and we're getting even closer. And crack is about to start. We're going right past our temperature, and now I've marked it. So we'll run on here a few more seconds, and I'll pause one last time to take a look at our LCDs. So let's pause it here. And we see that in this display, we're no longer showing anything about turning point or dry. Everything is focused around our first crack. And this is saying we're at 59 seconds after first crack. We've risen 14.1 degrees since then, and our development percentage at this point in time is 10.4. And we're seeing this display because we're in that all phases mode. I can take us out of that mode for just a moment so we can see what the percentage phases look like at this point in time. And I might add that even though I'm paused in the simulator, you can shift these modes by right-clicking or changing the phases mode while you're roasting. So it's possible to to make those changes live. So now that we're in the percentage mode, we can see what our dry percentage was, what our ramp percent or the Maillard phase was, and what our development percentage time. I had to run the simulation forward just a couple of seconds to flip those LCDs into this percentage mode. But you can see what that display looks like. So now let me go ahead and put it back into our phases all mode so we can see what's happening around FCS. The time and temperature since we hit first crack. We'll restart the simulation. And you see we're getting about 1 minute and 30 past. We're getting close to 20 degrees Fahrenheit in rise. And as we get around 22, we'll drop the beans. And I have an alarm set which stops my roast, and we're done. So I hope that was helpful for you to understand a bit more about how the phases LCDs work. And I want to just show you one more thing here, which is I'm going to turn on my ET-ROR curve and take advantage of a new feature capability in Artisan 2.6.0 that allows me to highlight just a portion of that ET-ROR curve. And if I wanted, I could actually hide the rest of it, or I can view all of it and just add this highlight. I could make that a different color. There's some interesting things that you can do with new capability in version 2.6. And so with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the perhaps lesser known features of Artisan, as well as some of the new features.
Thank you, Dave. And I mean, there's some stuff here that like I had no idea about. We talked before this actual webinar, and hearing about some of those features really kind of opened my mind to what's possible. So I hope that that's the case for everyone in attendance today.
I
And
hope so. I hope
yeah,
you come away knowing at least one new thing you can do that you'll use in your next roast.
yeah. And it looks like we're ready for some questions. And I do have some that have come in over our questions and answers uh, module here on Zoom. And the first one is from Paul, who's asking about uh, the burner and air settings being adjusted automatically on the graph. And uh, how do you turn off that feature if you don't want to have those air or burner settings uh, appear automatically?
Those may be um, those may be getting set in your events. Um, pardon my brain freeze while I switch over to to actually looking in Artisan. But those might be turned on accidentally, because it shouldn't be setting them arbitrarily. And if you're not controlling your roaster from Artisan, you actually don't want it setting them.
Right, so that might be through the automation through a setting there.
Yeah, it might be coming through an automation setting or under events. With the sliders, it's possible if you have your sliders turned on and commands set against them, that might be setting it. So it really depends on what's in your specific settings.
Right, so I'd suggest looking at your settings and checking the events section to make sure
Yes.
those things are turned off.
Yes.
All right. The next one comes to us from Pear, and they're asking, is there a way to show your gas changes and or your fan and air changes on the same page during the roast for your different roasts? So comparing the gas and air changes from a previous roast with a current one that's happening. Can you show that in the background?
Yes, absolutely. You can turn on in the background. Actually, maybe what I should try to do here, Evan, is um,
If you
the
have,
screens are a little
if
bit
you can
obscured
share.
with with the presentation here. So let me see if I can get into an Artisan view. Are you seeing Artisan here?
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, great. So let me, from here, I'm going to go into my events and I will turn on, and these are my settings now, not the default Artisan settings that we're looking at, but I'll turn on my power and my damper setting. And if I, let's see, the question was also about background as well, right? So
That's right.
my roast background. And here I can turn on
There it is.
events. And now we can see both the background and the current profile events. Let me just go into the simulator real quick. You can see the background changes are here. And then if I hit start, and unfortunately I came in at 1x here, I should have come in 4x so we could actually see things happening. But if I make changes to my damper settings or to my power settings, they're reflected here. So you can see both while you're roasting.
That's excellent. The next question, Philip is asking how do you record the in-between batch protocol? And that's something that I think is going to be super useful for those folks who have not been doing that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually a very easy answer. What you want to do is just start Artisan recording and let it run through that whole period. So Artisan has, excuse me, has a an option here under sampling called Keep On. And if you click that, when Artisan goes off at the end of a roast, Keep On will cause it to turn automatically back on. And if you have an alarm or you just press the start button, Artisan will begin recording, and it will record that between batch. And that's exactly what I do. Is at the end of my batch, I just have it turn on and go and start the next. Start the next batch. And during that between batch, you can make you can make the adjustments that you need, but it will record during that period, and it's very, very helpful later on to be able to go back and see what you did. And you can also during that time period, you can record your gas changes and any airflow changes or anything else that you want to record during that time. So I do exactly that, and capture all of that data.
For me, it was really super helpful when I was roasting on the Quest. So for those of you out there who roast on the Quest, the between batch protocol can be kind of frustrating. And this is very, very helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
So one person asked if they will be able to work with earlier artisan profiles on 2.6, and I'm pretty sure that's a yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So Artisan maintains compatibility with your old profiles. You can load them going back to, I'm sure, versions way before anybody on this webinar has used. So it will read them in just fine, and you can manipulate them with the new features that are available. But yes, Artisan is compatible with old profiles.
Thought so. Mike is asking, the BT to ET switching feature used to be at axes to filters, and he's wondering where that's located now.
BT to ET switching filters.
That would be yeah, the swap. There it is, right there.
Yeah, this swap is swapping the rate of rise LCDs. There's a swap. I should know this off of the top of my head. And there's also a swap for the LCD features, which is available here. And I think Mike is asking about actually swapping the inputs coming in. And I should know off the top of my head, but I am not. Give me one second here to take a look, and I will tell you. I don't use that feature, so
I think somebody said it's under roast tab, and I think that's correct, if I'm not mistaken. I've had to do this with my probes.
Yes, thank you.
As well.
Oh, there we are, under the roast tab.
There it is.
ET and BT, there it is.
Also easy peasy.
Yeah. Now, while we're here, let me point out switch profiles. That will switch your foreground and your background profile. So if you want to take the profile that you have in front and push it to the background and bring the background front, that's what this feature will do.
Excellent. Next question. Is there an Artisan 101 class? They're thinking this is a little bit too advanced, and I think I can answer that one. Really take a look at the Artisan website. It's full of all sorts of great documentation. If you're not prone to learning by reading, there's tons of great things on YouTube as well. There might be an official Artisan tutorial out there on video. Perhaps you could speak to that, Dave. But sure. I know that reading through the website has been super helpful for me over the years.
You'll find at artisan-scope.org, and I'll show a link in a moment, and some links to some other things for Artisan. But you'll find there a quick start guide, and the quick start guide is reading. It's written. It's not a video, but it walks you through getting things set up and your first few roasts to be able to learn how to use Artisan. Artisan does have a YouTube channel, but it is not populated yet with videos. We're looking to provide some of those in the coming year. And hopefully with some future sessions here with you, Evan, we can get into more of the how do I get Artisan connected and running to get my first roast done with my roaster.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do a webinar on that. That'd be super elucidating. Let's see. Are you ready for a couple more questions?
Absolutely.
All right. I think, we're only 1 minute over time. I think we could go for a little bit longer.
Sure.
Flint is asking, would simulator be a good way to make a new profile to use as a background for the purpose of roast planning? I think so. And for example, they want to start roasting a different batch size and want the background to remind of what the fan damper and the gap fittings are. I think that's exactly what the simulator would be great for, actually.
Yeah. Remember that the simulator requires a curve to follow. It's getting its temperatures from a pre-existing curve, but you can take one that was created in the designer and bring that into the simulator and run it against a background and work on the timings that you want to do. Obviously, there's the gas changes that you make in the simulator don't actually change the simulation, but it does allow you to work on when you want to make changes, or if there's a new feature in Artisan that you want to try out, or an old feature in Artisan that you want to try out, but you'd like to try using it and see how it works. With the simulator, you don't have to worry about being distracted with real beans in the drum or in your air roaster, for that matter. So yes, it does allow you to try out a lot of things.
That's great. And perhaps one more. Let's see. If Michael asked, after he saves his A-log file in a dialog box with the properties, it shows up in the upper right portion of the graph. Is there a way to stop this from happening?
I'm not 100% sure which display is being referred to, but let me go ahead and show you the two that are most likely.
Right.
So I'm going to load my profile here again. There is, under statistics, this is where you want to look. There's a display which looks like this. And
Right.
it shows time, delta temperatures, percentages, and RORs for the three different phases. That's one display, and you turn it off here in the statistics dialog if you don't want to see any of this. And then there's a summary, which is a summary set of statistics, and this may be what he's referring to.
I think that's the one.
That shows up here. And you turn it off just by unticking the summary in the statistics menu, which is under config. And I might mention, for those of you that do want to see the summary, summary works best when you turn on the auto time axis that I used earlier on here in one of the demonstrations. And when you turn that on, Artisan will set the time axis such that this is not overlapping any of your curve. So what I had done there, it shifted the curve or it compressed the time axis a little bit so that this was not hidden underneath my statistics.
That's great. So I think that should do it for questions. There's all sorts of ways to engage with Artisan as well. If you want to, yes, that's the slide. If you want to get a hold of them and you want to maybe even offer some of your own input and some of your own skills to the project, it's a really strong community, and this is just such a great program. If you have anything to add, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just, again, want to thank everybody for your time and attention. And you can follow these links. If you go to artisan-scope.org, there are links to everywhere else, but I've called out a couple of those here. There's, on the blog, there's detailed information about various Artisan features where we take a deep dive and explain how to use them. The quick start guide is a great resource for getting going with Artisan, so I strongly recommend following that. And then on the FAQ page, I'm reading kind of in backwards order here, but on the FAQ page, you'll find links to, excuse me, to Artisan's GitHub page, where we do have a discussions forum there, and also a place to report issues if you have any. And there, you'll find links on the FAQ page. And you can also reach me by email at this address, and artisan.plus at artisan.plus.
This has been really excellent, Dave. Thank you for taking the time and for putting this together. And I really look forward to doing more of these presentations in the future.
Great, I do too. Thank you so much, Evan.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming all the way from Portugal to Vancouver. Some Czech Republic people out there. Wow, great turnout.
Fantastic. Great, appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great weekend.